Area 54 is out by Indian Springs, and there you can drive on BLM land. And I did this with some friends some years ago. We just did a sky watch. We saw a lot of military activity, but no mothership coming down with supplies for the tall whites, which are said to live in a legacy underground base there. And that could be the reason why the Nellis Air Force Range picked a predetermined location where they already knew there was an underground alien base. The nuclear detonation for the very first time in human history at White Sands, New Mexico, there was quite a bit of UFO activity in the skies. So it was kind of like an alarm bell went off in the universe. Hey, Earthlings have nuclear bombs. The children are playing with matches in a very dry forest. We better see what's going on with them. And sure enough, we dropped those bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So we were even willing to use this incredible technology against our own human race. So that was certainly the wake-up call for the other ETs. And there are far more benevolent extraterrestrials in the universe than there are the malevolent ones. Now, we were talking earlier about the inner terrestrials, this being the Draco reptilians, who are kind of like a locust flock, that they're just all over the place and they just find vulnerable planets where they can make their a new home. They're not from here. They're not even from our universe. Whereas the Draco do have natural birth. But because they were meddling so much in Earth history, according to the Andromedan contactee Alex Collier, who has been a lifetime contactee, and I know him well, and we speak at conferences together, he has always maintained that they had to make a move on Earth, and that is because Earth was going to be a big problem 350 years in our future, that they came back looking at our timeline and saw that a great tyranny started here on Earth when? On 9/11/2001, which, by the way, there has still not been proper justice or disclosure on what really happened that day. So that just tell you that there is still a dark agenda at hand on Earth. And so by narrowing it down to this time frame, according to the Andromedans via Alex Collier, they needed to pinpoint when it happened and how these years would advance when we would become a real terror in the universe. Kind of like in the movie Avatar, where we're just out exploiting planets, the corporation, right? You can kind of see the writing on the wall already that it would go that way. And he said, this is what they're going to do. They're going to do predictive programming. They're going to do a controlled release. They're going to give us enough information to make us very intrigued with the whole idea. And then the big space opera in the sky happens. But it's not just that. It's also this, the Messiah will appear in Western countries that are Christian countries. You'll see Jesus in the sky, a holographic projection. But with the voice to skull technology, they could even put those voices right in your head. So just recently saw an interview with Sasha Stone talking about his contact at the Vatican, who says that at the Paris Summer Olympics next year, watch out, they're planning something big. She has new evidence and new whistleblower testimony stating that Eisenhower inherited a bad deal, because after that flyover, which now most UFO historians would agree were the Antarctic Nazis flying pole to pole at incredible speeds, going over the most sensitive military airspace in the country, if not the world, flying over with impunity, and then going right on back to their base in Antarctica without being able to be shot down. And that precipitated surrender terms to the Fourth Reich. And with that, Eisenhower inherited this enemy that he fought so hard to defeat in Europe as the supreme Allied commander, to only be told, look, these guys have superior technology. We want to try to buy some time, backward engineer our own craft, and catch up with these Fourth Reich Nazis.
Welcome to Beyond the Forbidden. Today on the show, I got a friend of mine. He's been a friend of the show for quite some time now. I would say at least 7-8 years, back to where when I used to be Mysterious Outpost. A crazy name, man. I have evolved over the years. I've had many names, but the original OG of this podcast was Cryptic Knowledge Radio back in 2010. But man, Brad freaking Olsen, welcome back to Beyond the Forbidden. How you been, man?
Hey, Michael, it's good to be back on Beyond the Forbidden. And you remember, one of our first interviews went viral. It was on before its news for about a week.
Oh, yeah.
You were the one that told me about that. And I had not known about that website until you said, man, we're still trending up on it. So
yeah,
we always have good stuff to say.
We do. It was the Vatican with the snake. Yep. And that,
which I
we might need
images of that in my book Beyond Esoteric.
Yep, which we're going to be talking about today because, like I said last year during our interview, man, that book Beyond Esoteric and all of your esoteric books, they're fascinating. They're great reads, and I want to dive into more of it. Which is only going to be like maybe a couple of chapters, you know. I do want to talk about the truth embargo chapter because I think that's kind of something that we're going through now. We are in a truth embargo state right now, you know, especially since our last discussion last year. All kind of crazy crap's happened, man. But yeah, I'm super stoked to have you back on, and just let everybody know, like throw everything out in the beginning, like your social medias and websites and all that, Brad.
Yeah, sure. If you want to find out more about me and some of the projects I'm working on, including my conference schedule, which are booking up for 2024 already, go to bradolsen.com, just as my name is spelled. And all the books that I've written, 10 books, and all the authors I've published, another dozen or more, can be found on cccpublishing.com. And that's the publishing website. And any of my books that are ordered from that website, I can sign copies for people, and they go through my office. So I'll get those out right away.
So before we get too much into it, the book, and we're going to be talking about things that's going on since then. But so last year was the first time we had a discussion since your Antarctica trip. And I don't get too much into it, you know, your Antarctica trip, because it's out there. You've done a lot of talks about it. But I guess give everybody a little rundown on your Antarctica trip. And I know you had like some kind of, you got really sick and things like that. And how in the hell did you even get to go down there first place? I meant to ask you this last year, but we dove into your book and I never really got into the Antarctica thing. So.
Yeah, well, it was about 5 years ago that I was just getting down to South America, bought a car in Santiago, Chile, put about 3,000 miles on it. And the southernmost point is the southernmost city in the world, which is Ushuaia, Argentina. And it's there where about 90% of the boat traffic going down to Antarctica leaves from. And most people are hopping on a cruise ship, but we had the opportunity to get on a sailboat, and having some sailing experience with my dad, I thought, man, that's the way to go. Plus you get about 3 times as much time down there. So an average cruise ship, 2 days sailing over the Drake Passage, 5 days on the Palmer Peninsula, 2 days back. So 9-day trip. Whereas we got on a sailboat, which was longer to get down there. It was 92 hours, just under 4 days.
Damn.
But the whole trip was 26 days. So almost 3 times as long. But that sailing over the Drake Passage, which is notoriously the stormiest seas of the world, boy, that one kicked my ass, Michael. I was violently
seasick
for several days.
I get seasick easy. I've been wanting to go on and please continue, but I've been wanting to go on a cruise forever. Never gone on a cruise. I'm kind of afraid. You know, they say take Dramamine. I don't know if they make anything strong enough, man. I get car sick if I'm not the one behind the wheel. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like, well, it's
Yeah.
got to be somebody I know and trust. You know,
Yeah.
but I can't be in the back seat. You know, like, man, not going to do it. But anyways, go ahead, man. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. And yeah, take your Dramamine, but you got to take it a day ahead of time. We took it just before we
Oh, didn't
came
know
out of
that.
the Beagle Passage and turned on the Drake, and it was too late. So not only did I throw up all the food that was in my stomach from the past 2 days, but for 3 days I couldn't eat. And so it was the Drake Passage crash diet. I think I lost 25 pounds on that trip. Just a miserable time laying in the bunk in very heavy seas. The biggest trip you'd make for the whole day was getting out of the bunk, steadying yourself across a rocky cabin, getting to the bathroom, puking, and using the restroom at the same time. That was the highlight of those days. Just to be able to relieve yourself and then make yourself back in the bunk. And then the boat was tilted at a good 30-degree tilt as we were sailing most of the time. And then you'd be pinned to one side of the boat or pinned to the other. It was a unique experience, only to be experienced once. If I go back to Antarctica, it would be with a film crew, and we're talking to some investors right now and production companies about going to the New Schwabenland area where the Nazi base was, and possibly getting down there and seeing some of the sites and maybe even finding some relics of the old New Schwabenland base 211.
And we may touch into that a little bit about that, but I just want to go ahead and give everybody just a brief touch of, you know, your Antarctica trip. And I'm sure we'll touch in a little bit Antarctica within this discussion. So,
Sure.
So your book, Beyond Esoteric, everybody knows I've mentioned it several times during other interviews, other than just our discussion last year, actually November of last year, exactly 12 months. You were the last interview I did right before my daughter was born. And so I first want to touch on the Truth Embargo chapter. And actually have several quotes that I want to talk about. But and the whole book, for everybody listening, I'm gonna give the link in the description for everybody to check out the entire book. All of his books are good. He's well versed. He's good with his words, and he knows what the hell he's talking about. He's been doing this for what Brad, since the early '90s, something like that. Your research, early mid '90s or something.
Mid '90s, yeah. I'm going on 30-year anniversary.
So he's been around this field for a while, doing a lot of research over the years. So this is a quote from Truth Embargo chapter. Quote, consider the truth like a standing pole which always remains unchanged. It is possible to dress the pole with flags of disinformation and lies, but underneath the truth always remains constant. The goal is always to find the truth, no matter how difficult it may be to unmask the flags and accept the conclusions. UFO researchers will say the truth embargo began when the extraterrestrial presence was understood between 1947 and 1953. And this explains why a massive government disinformation campaign became so successful. It is estimated that between January 1947 and December 1952, at least 16 crashed or downed alien craft, 65 alien bodies, and at least one live alien were recovered, end quote. So I guess explain to the audience, we'll go into that quote a little bit here in just a minute, but what is because like I said, I would say, I don't know, the next 30 minutes or I don't know how long, we're going to be talking about the truth embargo. So explain what is the truth embargo to you before we dive into this quote and other quotes, Brad.
Well, the embargo term was coined by Stephen Bassett, who's the only lobbyist in Washington, D.C., pushing for the truth. I know Stephen, we've known each other several years. He actually did an introduction for Modern Esoteric, another one of the books, when I did the book launch party. And he speaks extensively on the truth embargo. So borrowed that term to be the whole section in the book Beyond Esoteric, and the first chapter called The Truth Embargo, basically outlining how so much of this information pertaining to the extraterrestrial presence, to UFO sightings, and everything related to that subject has just been covered up, has not been allowed to get out to the people. That is, until now. And I find it kind of suspect in a way that now we're having congressional hearings. Of course, David Grush appeared before Congress in this summer, in June. In fact, I was at Contacting the Desert as a speaker this summer, and they stopped the UFO panel to break the news that David Grush is talking about crash retrievals and alien bodies, and he's very well decorated, well known in this field. So it's not like he was faking anything or making it up. But the question is, Michael, why now? Why is this information starting to come out now? Because disclosure was just a little drip, drip, drip of information.
That's why I picked this chapter, Brad. That's why I picked this chapter. That's why I picked this chapter. And you have so many great other chapters, but I just had to pick this because we're kind of at this crossroads, and a lot of shit that has happened since our last discussion last year.
And in 1 year, that's right. And now disclosure has become a pretty steady flow. I mean, it's not cracking the whole dam apart, but a crack is being formed. And that is, the truth is finally starting to get out there. But it is a managed disclosure opening up of this embargo. It's not everything right away. And you got to know that everything happens for a reason. They're not going to give us the full scope and scale of everything UFO ET related all at once. I think it's a managed flow to just kind of get people conditioned to the idea that we are not alone. We've never been alone. That not just look to the skies, they're coming from a distant land, but also, how about right below our feet, the interterrestrials that could be right here on Earth. And then the whole concept of ultra terrestrials. There you go.
Yeah.
Those who may exist in multiple dimensions and can phase in and out of our third dimensional reality. So this field is really expanding as we come to know more. But we're not holding our breath waiting for the government to make another disclosure. I've always said that disclosure is very grassroots. It's from the ground up. It's people like you and me that are talking about the latest findings. And right now I'm in Las Vegas, and they had a very famous UFO landing in a backyard not too far away from where I'm at right now in North Las Vegas a couple months ago. And some of my researcher friends even went out there and investigated, and they said, yeah, something definitely came down. And even the neighbors were quite rattled by the whole experience. So a lot of people had witnessed it. They filmed it, caught some of these entities on film. Craft flew away, and other people tracked it as it flew across the sky that night. So it's these kind of personal experience, because everybody nowadays has one of these phones. So the filming being recorded by multiple people, that adds a lot of credibility. When you have multiple data points of the same experience, people capturing it, putting it up online, social media, talking about it, that also helps with this grassroots movement when you get a lot of people contributing to this grassroots movement of disclosure. And that's what's really exciting to me, because we're not holding our breath waiting for any of these government or military agencies to make these releases. We're just doing it ourselves because we're capturing the footage right there.
So we're going to continue with Beyond Esoteric and the Truth Embargo chapter and disclosure, but you just brought up footage and the cell phone. And so it made me think, does the phenomena even want to be photographed? Yes, we've gotten pictures, we've gotten videos, yes, but it's not quite as much as it should be. You know what I mean? Because why do you think that is? Is it because we only see, do you think there's some type of interdimensional something at work here, or is it our light spectrum, we only see less than 1% of the visible radiation spectrum? Like, what's going on here? Because yes, we have remarkable footage, don't get me wrong, over the years, the decades, but I believe we should have a lot more than what we have by now, you know?
Do you want to help support Beyond Forbidden and receive extra content that's not seen anywhere else? By becoming a patron, a few things you will receive are the full-length 90-minute or 120-minute podcast episode. Members will also receive a private link to the video podcast and will only be exclusive to Patreon members. In-person, face-to-face interviews with some of the most well-known, respected researchers. Behind-the-scenes footage of interviews not seen anywhere else. And that's just a few perks. So what do you have to lose? Cut out one brain-rotting, overly processed Happy Meal a month that doesn't do anything beneficial for your mind, body, and spirit, and become a Patreon for just $5.
Yeah, and you got to question how much that has been suppressed, especially that came from military or government sources. There has been a gag order for decades to suppress that information. And really only in the last decade have people had these kind of smartphones with video capabilities. And that's probably why we've seen so many more sightings in the sky. And it seems it's almost a daily basis that we get some report from somewhere in the world of another UFO or ET sighting. Some of them are even of a close encounter of the fourth or fifth kind, which are face to face. So it's really exciting time to be in this field as a researcher, to look at all this information and talk to a lot of the other filmmakers like Third Phase of Moon, those guys, the Cousins brothers doing great work out there, staying always on topic, not going into some of the other fringe or side projects, but just staying with UFO footage. And they're coming out with great stuff several times a month from people submitting their films to them. So the embargo is starting to crack. It's not really holding itself up in weight anymore. And I think that's why they're allowing this testimony to take place, because how come now? Why not 75 years ago when Roswell crashed, or all the other crash retrievals or compelling evidence? Why do they feel right now is the time that this has to come out? And I think there's an ulterior motive, and that would be this Project Bluebeam, which is this fake alien invasion, which Werner von Braun, one of the paperclip Nazis, told his assistant Carol Rosen back in the 70s that there would be this fake alien invasion. Of course, I outline it in Beyond Esoteric. And he said that this would be the last step the globalists would take before they went to full New World Order globalist fascist government. And that's the first section of my book called New Fascism, the neo-fascism, which is now taking foot. So they kind of work hand in hand. Why the embargo of all UFO ET material to the New World Order fascism, globalist takeover and one world government they're trying to do. And there you go. Jim Mars, I met him before he passed away. Great guy. And the Fourth Reich is very much a real phenomenon.
And you talk a lot about the Fourth Reich, you know, in your book, Beyond Esoteric. So I guess to go on that, why now though? Because that's one thing I've kind of contemplated over the past couple of years. And you know, we've had so much shit come forward, you know, like this year, last year, it seems like each year is getting more ramped up. And it's like, and they're jumping on the bandwagon. That's what I feel like. Or they're trying to take control of the narrative. I'm not sure. Trying to be careful with my words. But at least for the first hour. But I just don't understand why now, because I'm always had this skeptical mind, because this community, people that's been researching, you know, UFOs and alien life and the paranormal in general and the fringe, you know, we've been ridiculed in the past. I've gone through a lot. I've mentioned it several times. I've gone through many bad relationships because of what I do. Found the perfect woman now, but many years later. And I've lost one of my best friends. Lost one of my best friends growing up because of what I do, and we've gone through the pits of hell because of this research, and just whether you're doing it full time or just an armchair researcher, and you like, this is just like a hobby, a passion. You want more truth and answers, but why are they jumping on the bandwagon now after all the years of toying with us, Brad?
Well, I would have to come back and say it's because Project Bluebeam is slated to take place next year in 2024. There's this grisly old CIA whistleblower who came out in the late 1980s saying that he knew the upcoming plans of the globalists, and the CIA has long been described as the enforcement arm of the globalists. So they would do the dirty work, the wet works as it's called. But he came out with it and said, look, they're going to pull this off. It'll be long past I died, and he has since died. Just looking up his name right now, trying to find it. But I remember he was a real grizzled old man. He's like, I look at the kids out here in the park and they have no idea what's coming to them.
It's drawing a blank. I know who you're talking about. I'll try to pull them up too. I forgot I know exactly who you're talking about though. I'll try to find it myself.
And he said, this is what they're going to do. They're going to do predictive programming. They're going to do a controlled release. They're going to give us enough information to make us very intrigued with the whole idea. And then the big space opera in the sky happens. But it's not just that, it's also this, the Messiah will appear in Western countries that are Christian countries. You'll see Jesus in the sky, a holographic projection, but with the voice to skull technology, they could even put those voices right in your head. So just recently saw an interview with Sasha Stone talking about his contact at the Vatican, who says that at the Paris Summer Olympics next year, watch out, they're planning something big. And we know from other Olympic opening and closing ceremonies, most notably the London Olympics, the Grim Reaper and hospital scenes and beds and so on, some kind of pandemic coming down the pike, and that proved to be exactly the predictive programming they wanted to get people thinking, oh yeah, we're gonna have a big outbreak somewhere, and better watch out because we saw it in the opening ceremonies. So
yeah,
I don't doubt it. But here's the other part of the whole Project Bluebeam. I don't know if where you're at in Louisiana, you're seeing it as much as I'm seeing it out west here, but they're chemtrailing really heavy again.
Oh yeah,
there was a period where it let up, but now recently, boy, the whole sky was white yesterday, and it shouldn't be out in the desert here. Blue sky days in Nevada. So they're spraying really heavily, and part of that is to put this particulate matter that doesn't always drop to the ground but stays up in the atmosphere, making the atmosphere conductive. And in that conductivity, you can do a number of things with a military aspect, but in the case of Project Bluebeam, it helps to have smoke or some kind of atmospheric stuff out there, such as particulate matter, that makes the atmosphere conductive. So I think they're spraying the skies real heavy now, coming into next year, for this very reason. The globalists are being exposed more than they've ever been, and they know they got to make their move. That's why the mother weffers there in Geneva, Switzerland, have upped the schedule from 2030 to 2025. That is, you'll own nothing and be happy, all this stuff on the World Economic Forum website, Klaus Schwab, saying that we're going to eat the bugs and you're going to own nothing and be happy. This is their agenda. This is their plan. And this is the neo-fascism that I outline in Beyond Esoteric, because people absolutely need to be made aware of what their plans are and how they're going to execute.
And the technology, man, it's already there, Brad. Like, I'm about to pull up something. This was from New Year's of 2021, the Seattle Needle. You go and skip that ad here, and I'm about to screen share this. Boom, boom. Here we go. Got the audio turned down, but this was from, look at that.
Wow.
This is all this is all holograms.
Mm.
Look at this.
Wow.
Is that remarkable or what, man?
So there you go. I mean, if they can do something like that, surely they can project UFOs and some kind of space war going on, or a Messiah in the sky.
Look how crystal clear that looks.
Some videos of that happening.
Look at that.
That's wild,
man. And that is something. Yes, the technology is already there, but that's just that right there. I feel like what you just saw right there, and the things that we've been talking about in this field for a long time, the technology that they show us, man, there's no telling what the shit they have behind the scenes. You know what I'm saying? Like that could be 50 or 100 years more advanced. That looks real. You know what I mean? That's clear. Like, imagine what they have in the black world, you know?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is where it starts getting really weird, because they have the ability to fake some of this stuff and play it off as being real. And look, the media is allowed to lie and propagandize. The laws with truth in the media and truth in advertising, these were laws that were put on the book in the 1950s. They all got stripped away last decade. And by doing so, they have given the mass media carte blanche ability to lie to people. And the CIA is largely behind it. You know, they're the Project Mockingbird that puts their assets in all these top media conglomerations. And it was William Colby speaking to the newly elected President Reagan early 1981 at a press briefing with the CIA. And he said, with multiple witnesses, we'll know our disinformation campaigns are successful when everything the American people believe is false. So they're purposefully trying to create this false matrix of reality and keep people like you and I from having meaningful discussions and getting down to the nitty gritty of all this and understanding what exactly is going on here.
Mm-hmm. So here's another quote from your Truth Embargo chapter in Beyond Esoteric. Quote, when the British failed to expel the Germans from Antarctica, the U.S. launched Operation High Jump in 1946 to destroy the German base to 11. The ground and air forces were fought back by Germany's flying saucers, ending the operation prematurely by 4 months. In July 1952, Washington, D.C. was visited by multiple unidentified flying objects over the capital, which many researchers believed were the Antarctica craft, which Admiral Byrd said could fly pole to pole at incredible speeds. So and I'm going to break that down, that chapter, that quote just a little bit. But first, do you think that these two events, Brad, were possibly related? What I mean in particular, are the UFOs, or do you think that these UFOs, whatever they are the same origin, the ones from, let's say, 1947 or 1946, when they went down to Antarctica,
right?
And the ones that flew over Washington, D.C. in 1952?
52, that's right. Great question. And I do think they are related. First of all, Admiral Byrd made that statement when he was coming back after Operation High Jump ended 4 months prematurely. And he mentioned it to a journalist at El Mercurio newspaper. And some interpretations are saying that he said that we would have an enemy that could fly from the poles, whether it's from pole to pole in incredible speeds or coming from the poles, which really doesn't make any sense. Where are their enemies at the South Pole or North Pole? And coming directly from Operation High Jump, it still says that there could be flights coming from the poles of an enemy that we'll have to deal with. He said that in early 1947. So then just a few years later, you have the famous flyover Washington, D.C. in July 1952. And I have pictures of that beyond. It's very...
Are you breaking up or am I breaking up? Let me see something here.
So the connection between Operation High Jump and what Admiral Byrd said at the to the Chilean newspaper journalists after Operation High Jump, with that we would be confronted with an enemy that could fly pole to pole at incredible speeds. Some people interpret that to say that this enemy would come from the pole, but either way, what are we talking about with a new enemy coming from the South Pole? That really makes no sense because nobody's down there. And then you have the flyover of Washington, D.C. in July 1952. So these are the waning months of the Truman administration. And my friend Laura Eisenhower, who was great-granddaughter of Dwight D. Eisenhower, is going to come out with a new book published by CCC Publishing this spring called Awakening the Truth Frequency. And in it, she has new evidence and new whistleblower testimony stating that Eisenhower inherited a bad deal, because after that flyover, which now most UFO historians would agree were the Antarctic Nazis flying pole to pole at incredible speeds, going over the most sensitive military airspace in the country, if not the world, flying over with impunity, and then going right on back to their base in Antarctica without being able to be shot down. And that precipitated surrender terms to the Fourth Reich. And with that, Eisenhower inherited this enemy that he fought so hard to defeat in Europe as the supreme Allied commander, to only be told, look, these guys have superior technology. We want to try to buy some time, backward engineer our own craft, and catch up with these Fourth Reich Nazis. That didn't really go over too well with Eisenhower. And he found out that they were doing our own backward engineering at Area 51 here in Nevada. And he wasn't allowed to go. He was denied access as the commander-in-chief. He threatened to bring the First Army and invade Area 51 if they didn't let him see what they were doing down there. They worked out some kind of agreement. He never did, but just goes to show that even by the time of Eisenhower, things were getting away from the presidents. And it was said that Kennedy was the last one who was really debriefed on the whole phenomenon. And he, of course, too, wanted to break up and splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and throw it into the wind. He said to his brother, Robert Kennedy. And he was also working on creating a treasury note. There are many reasons why that was an inside job to take out Kennedy, but he also wanted to normalize relationship with the Soviet Union and even combine both of our space programs to explore our solar system, go back to the moon, go out to Mars, and create a space station together, which in some ways actually happened with the International Space Station. But Kennedy was pushed in the envelope a little too far, too fast, and he did not get to run for a second term, in which he most certainly would have won, and things would have been completely different. We'd be living in a different world right now, Michael, had Kennedy survived the assassination and won a second term.
I totally agree with that. And we would not be, I'm sure we'd have some levels of corruption, I'm sure, but it wouldn't be as bad. And the truth embargo, this disclosure fiasco that we've been facing, trying to get, I think we would be a lot further ahead. Maybe not exactly what we want, but probably more than what we have already. which it's not,
Mhm.
it's been going pretty good, the past several years. Not bad, but, and we'll probably talk more about it, like, can we even trust what's going on 100%? But I had that later down in the notes. But back to that quote that I read, you was talking about Antarctica and high jump and 1952, the UFOs over DC. So do you think that all those, or do you think that those were ET in origin? Like all of them, especially the ones back then, like even because there was a bunch of UFO sightings back then. Or do you think that it was maybe a mixture, like a happy mixture of reverse technology that we captured and we created some of these crafts ourselves, and some of them that were captured or seen by people and even captured on old photographs, maybe some of those were actually ours, and we had our pilots in them. What do you think, Brad?
Well, certainly the U.S. has been very interested in ET technology since World War II at the earliest. And we've had a series of crashes that came down, starting with Roswell, which was not just one, but two crashes in a lightning storm. Those two ships hit each other because the Army was using radar to aim at any kind of UFO craft they saw, and they found that it would mess with the navigational instruments, and oftentimes they could take these crash down, which they had done and continued to do well into the 1950s, just to get those crash retrievals, which were sent to Wright-Patterson base in Ohio. That was where all the bodies went and all the craft to work on backward engineering. And then once they were able to come out with some engineering plans and create the craft itself, then they would bring them out to the testing grounds at Area 51. And now most of that testing is done in Dugway in Utah. So I've done multiple sky watches here in Rachel, Nevada, close as you can get to Area 51. Tried to do it on Wednesday night when Bob Lazar used to take his group out, stay up all night and just watch skies. And we rarely ever see anything. Maybe one time we saw a drone or some kind of movement around the horizon up towards Area 51. But for the most part, I think a lot of that has been moved out to Dugway, Utah. And that is even more remote than near Las Vegas, where the Nellis Air Force Base is. And,
Not too far
but
from
a lot of people
Skinwalker
still go
Ranch
there to
too,
work.
though. Not too far from
Say again?
Skinwalker. I think the Dugway Proving Grounds not too far away from Skinwalker, correct?
Yeah, for sure.
So, what do you think's going on? You brought up Area 51. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's kind of the old hat, that because it's kind of been exposed and it's on everybody's radar now, thanks to John Lear, everybody else that went out there.
Yeah.
So what do you think you think they still working on like advanced technologies, and they kind of leaving like all and maybe they're shipping some of that advanced technologies maybe to Dugway, and that's where they're experimenting on the craft, or what? Well, what do you think is going on out there? If you had to speculate on that.
They're still definitely working out here in Area 51 in this private area because they have the infrastructure, the great big runway. It's very interesting. I was just looking at it on Google Earth the other day. I was trying to find S4, which is at Papoose Lake. And for a while there, a year ago, you could actually see it on Google Earth. And now they've just taken it off again. But what you can see is a very high resolution of Area 51, of the Groom Lake facility, which before was always either real fuzzy or even just knocked out, so you couldn't really see anything. It's the biggest secret that everybody knows about, right? So I think that the active testing has moved to Dugway, but they still do backward engineering technology, perhaps working on the craft here. You also have to understand there's a entire network of underground, deep underground military bases, and as well as the tubes that travel at Mach 2 speed. So they can move material around, maybe not an intact craft, but pieces of it through the tube. So they don't even have to fly it to Dugway if they wanted to move a new, smaller craft over there. So I think it's still ongoing. Why wouldn't it be? Right? Because this is what they've always said, is we need to backward engineer this technology so we have an advance on our enemies, and probably why so many countries are very reluctant to engage with America, because it's just like Germany at the very end of World War II with their wonder weapons. The Allies were scared senseless that they were going to break out these wonder weapons and just zap them all or fry them all. And that Germany was very, very close to detonating the very first atomic bomb if they hadn't already done so, because a lot of their scientists came right on over to the Manhattan Project and were working on our atomic bomb testing program.
Do you think do you think that, and just to play devil's advocate, do you think that some of the things that has been released, either maybe through FOIA or there could be just inside people within, I don't know, these deep black projects or CIA or whoever, that they could be doing some type of disinformation campaign? I'm not saying on everything, not everything. And they are releasing certain things that could be misinformation and disinformation, so that you have certain, people on YouTube or social media, because, man, things will get tweeted and people will talk about everything, especially when they want to be the first, And do you think that's a ploy by the CIA or whoever, whatever these groups are, to scare our foreign enemies? Maybe some of it is made up. I'm not saying all, no, I don't believe that. But some of it, maybe, I don't know which ones, if I had to pick, I don't know. But could be a ploy to scare our enemies, kind of like what you said, to make them say, hey, don't mess with the U.S., man. They got this crazy technology over there,
Right. Hey, it worked in World War II when we were invading Germany. So why wouldn't they try to scare our enemy? That's right out of Lao Tzu, The Art of War.
Yes,
to make
I got that book somewhere.
Fear you, even when you don't have exactly what it is you're projecting that you could attack with.
So I don't want to stay too much on the ancient past, but going through, that Truth Embargo chapter and other chapters in your book, but you like I said, you've been doing this research for a long time. You talk about ancient mysteries all the way up to modern day with UFOs and extraterrestrial but anyways, are you a subscriber, Brad, or consider the possibility that these craft and or other UFOs that are spotted around the world, let's say the past 100 years, hell, even possibly even the past 1,000 years or several thousand years, maybe actually be, do you think that they could actually be, some of them or all, I don't know, possibly of Earth origin? Some call it the alien, and you kind of touched on this earlier in the show. Some call it the alien Earth hypothesis or ET hypothesis. Maybe some of these ETs have been here, maybe not all, but maybe some of them have been here alongside the evolution of Homo sapiens since the very beginning. What say you, Brad?
Well, that's great observation, Michael, because all around the world, petroglyph and pictographs show big-headed figures with big eyes and sometimes wearing a space suit helmet, which how would Aboriginal Indians in Australia and in Algeria and other locations, even here in Utah, in some of the petroglyph sites showing these very tall, very big-eyed, wearing a gown in some kind of ceremonial setting. Why do they depict them in the same way, as being taller than us, being bigger eyes, and sometimes wearing astronaut suits.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems that primitive people had been in contact with them. And I have an image in the book that shows what looks like a UFO cave painting next to a UFO, image of a extraterrestrial next to an image of a ET. And it said, they saw, they drew it because they saw it. And that's very common, just like with some of the cave art in France. In Mesolithic times, they're drawing species of animals that they wanted to hunt, that they were just fascinated with. And then there was the whole study of the people in the South Pacific who had encountered the U.S. military and what they call the cargo cult.
Yep.
And I kind of think that people today were sort of like these primitive people who had seen a very high-tech civilization, that being the American Army, come in, set up airstrips, flying airplanes that these primitive people had never seen before, and Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, but most especially in New Caledonia. And the great anthropologist Margaret Mead, I think, she was studying these people who still had these different, they would build out of bamboo and other wood, they would build airplanes, and they would build a desk. And one of the people, this is decades after World War II ended, they had a little wattle telephone that they modeled after the telephone, and the person would order the cargo to come in, and the cargo would come down in parachutes, and some of that would be intercepted by the primitive people. They'd open it up and just find all these fantastic belongings. So Margaret Mead dubbed them the cargo cult. And that's where the term John From comes from, because they still, to the time that she was studying them, called the people from far away John From. And it took her a while to get down to the bottom of that. What does that mean, John From? Well, we know John is a name from America, very common name. But these servicemen would introduce themselves to the primitive people and say, I'm John from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm John from Illinois. I'm John from Los Angeles. And that's where John From comes from. So I illustrate this in my book, Modern Esoteric, in the Primitive Wisdom chapter, that shows, yeah, we're kind of like the cargo cult. We're still looking to the skies and waiting for them to appear. And we build our own UFOs. And I did one out at Burning Man a couple of years ago, and we burned it out at Burning Man. And so
you imagine you imagine the soldiers, Brad, and I didn't to cut you off, but you imagine the soldiers. Not saying it's funny, but you can relate to possibly the ancient alien, the ancient astronaut theory. Imagine these soldiers, they went over there in that island, with the cargo cult. He said, "We are your gods. We created you."
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And then and then they bow the knee, and how about we do some genetic modification, try to see if we can jump race your evolution? I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It just makes you wonder if that's what happened in the ancient past, with the ancient astronaut theory and or something similar. But with the, back to what I asked you, rather they have been here all along, because some people say that they've always been here. Okay. And there are no extraterrestrials. Aliens have always been here. They're here. Well, what if it's both? What if they came from out there, but they've been here the entire time, and they may just come and go, kind of like, you know what I mean? Well, what's your thoughts on that? They've been here for thousands of years. I'm not saying maybe all races, maybe just a certain handful of races. I don't know. And this is kind of their domain now,
Exactly. And I would take that a step further. And what I was saying about the inner terrestrials, they didn't even have to come from a distant planet. They've been here in some of these underground bases. I call them legacy bases. I could name a half a dozen just right here in North America. You have Mount Shasta with the underground city of Talos. More notoriously is the Archuleta Mesa near the town of Dulce, New Mexico. And I outline the Nightmare Hall and all the things that have gone down there, including some of the underground wars that our special forces tried to root them out, but were routinely beaten back with heavy loss of life. And of course, Philip Schneider, who worked in the underground bases, he spoke of that and even showed how his hand got zapped by a laser beam from one of the aliens when he went down there. And he opened up his shirt and showed his chest was all mangled, and it's a miracle he survived. He, like William Cooper, paid the ultimate price and died or killed because they were whistleblowers. It's not the most safest, secure industry we could be in, Michael, but
Do you want to help support Beyond Forbidden and receive extra content that's not seen anywhere else? By becoming a patron, a few things you will receive are the full-length 90-minute or 120-minute podcast episode. Members will also receive a private link of the video podcast and will only be exclusive to Patreon members. In-person, face-to-face interviews with some of the most well-known, respected researchers. Behind-the-scenes footage of interviews not seen anywhere else. And that's just a few perks. So what do you have to lose? Cut out one brain-rotting, overly processed Happy Meal a month that doesn't do anything beneficial for your mind, body, and spirit, and become a Patreon for just $5.